Started. I guess I won't be needing all these pens, but my name is Mary Ullmer, and I'm the sports editor at the Grand Rapids Press. I'm here today to talk to you kind of about sports writing in the internet age, but also kind of about sports writing in the past, because I think to know where we're going, you have to know where we came from. A little bit about myself. I've been at the press for 11 years now. Probably about half of that as the sports editor. I came in as a copy editor, kind of worked my way back up, I'd say, because I started in this business when I was 18 years old at the Muskegon Chronicle, paper I'm sure you're familiar with. I was going to junior college at MCC and working at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Hated it. I'd go home smelling like chicken and grease. A friend of mine saw a classified ad in the Chronicle that said, hey, they're looking for people to take scores over the phone, what I call my night clerks, because you always work at night. And basically what that position is coaches will call in results, and you're the person on the phone taking the results from the coaches, and when you look in the box score the next day in the paper, that's the product of that work. So I started out doing that when I was 18. After I finished at community college, I transferred to Central Michigan, got my degree there, but I continued to work at the Chronicle on weekends. So my schedule up at Central went something like Monday through Thursday classes, never schedule a Friday class if you can. I would come home Thursday nights, work at the Chronicle, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, do all my homework on Sunday, and drive back Monday morning to school. So I didn't have a lot of fun in college, and it's okay because it got me where I am now. Once I graduated from Central, stayed at the Chronicle for a few years. I eventually became the sports editor there. And when I was 28, I kind of decided, okay, either I'm going to be in Muskegon my whole life, or I'm going to see what's out there. I got a call from the Springfield News Leader in Missouri, and they asked me to come interview for a job as their sports editor. And I thought, well, here it is, either I go or I stay. So I went, and I was there for about a year. Learned a lot there, but had a hard time with it because I'm a water girl, and growing up on Lake Michigan and then being in landlocked Missouri was a little difficult for me. So after a year there, and plus I was the first female sports editor there as well as Muskegon, and it was kind of hard. The guys, I think, had a real hard time and tried to test me a lot, but I did okay there. Got a call from the Sun-Sentinel in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to come down and be a senior copy editor there. And if you know anything about newspapers, the Sun-Sentinel was one of the first to do a separate college football section and a separate pro football section on the weekends. So for Sunday, they would have their regular sports section, but then they would have an entire section just devoted to college football. And it was way cool. Same thing with the NFL, with the Dolphins down there and everything. So I loved that because I really dug football. And they're an award-winning newspaper, and so in South Florida, my God, coming from Michigan in the winters up here, what are you going to do? So went down there, worked there for about 3.5 years. While I lived down there, my mom had passed away, and just living in South Florida was kind of weird, and they told me going in it would be, because nobody's from there. It's all northerners and people from all over the country going to South Florida. And it really had an effect on me, and the old cliche, I missed the seasons. I really did. It was hard to sit in there on Sunday afternoon and watch football when it's 85 degrees outside. You should be outside. I'm like, no, I want to watch football. So the Chicago Tribune called, and they were in the same company. So they called and had an opening, and I had always dreamed about working in Chicago at the Tribune. So I got the job there, came back up north, decided, okay, I'll dress appropriately for winter. I'll learn how to ski. I'll embrace winter, and I have. I worked at the Trib for 5 or 6 years, I guess, and my main responsibility there was I was the high schools editor, and if you know Chicago, we covered more than 300 high schools in the Chicago area. And some of the athletes you know nowadays, like Donovan McNabb and Quentin Richardson, Corey Maggette, those guys, I saw them when they were in high school. And it's pretty cool now to watch some of these guys. And it's like, I remember he was our athlete of the year or something like that, So working there, I also, because I was the high school's editor, the summers were relatively free because the high schools aren't in session. So I was named the coordinating editor for the NBA Finals in Michael Jordan's final 2 years. And what that meant was I had to decide what kind of coverage we were going to do. And I got to go on site. I got to go to Indiana when they played the Pacers in the previous round, and then go to Utah because they played Utah both years. So that was real tough. We had 13 reporters and 7 photographers out in Utah. And I was the person that basically directed, okay, here's what you're going to write today, here's what you're going to write, which was really kind of a scam because we knew every day we were going to have somebody write about Michael Jordan. We were going to have somebody write about, Scottie Pippen. Somebody was writing about the coach. Somebody was writing about the Utah coach. So it was kind of just a matter of setting it all up. So we'd go to the morning shoot-arounds, and we would decide all of that. And then it was the reporters' jobs to go do their stories, so I was kind of free. I got to hike all around Utah and see Salt Lake City, and it was pretty amazing. It was pretty fun. And then, of course, I like to say that when Michael Jordan left Chicago, so did I, because why be there? But I did get a job back home in Grand Rapids, and a lot of people said, why would you leave the Tribune to do that? And my best explanation is that, my job became my life. Chicago is a great town if you have time to enjoy anything, but I was getting on the train. I was getting up in the morning, reading the paper, getting prepared, getting on the train, and I lived 10 miles from work, and it took me an hour to get to work. Get on the train, you get to work, I'd have a meeting at 11, and I'd be there till, 10:30 at night, take the train home, watch SportsCenter, go to bed. And that's what I was doing every night. So it was kind of like, well, this isn't exactly, Plus I had my fun there. I was also the coordinating editor for the Women's World Cup when it was in the United States. And, learned a lot about soccer in that. I wasn't a soccer fan before then, but I quickly became one once I learned how the game is played and learned the rules and all that stuff. So I had an opportunity to come back to West Michigan and be closer to my family. And I called it kind of at the time a semi-retirement because I was a copy editor. I could go in and do my job and go home and not worry about it. But I'm kind of the kind of person that eventually takes over. And so I eventually became the sports editor at the Press. And when Bob Becker retired, I was put in his position. So that's kind of where I am. And actually, in a couple weeks, on 11/11/11, I'm going to be inducted in the Central Michigan University Journalism Hall of Fame. So, and that more is based on my mentoring skills than my editing skills, I think. I've helped bring up a lot of good writers. Michael Rosenberg at the Free Press was an intern of mine in Chicago. John Paul Morosi, who was at the Freep and now is with, I think he's with Fox Sports, MLB.com, or one of those, FoxSports.com, covering Major League Baseball. He was one of my interns. Got a guy at the New York Times who was one of my interns, another woman at USA Today. She's their national college basketball writer. She was actually one of my part-time clerks, those phone people I was telling you about. She started out as one of those, and I recognize her talents and her efforts and got her into writing and that kind of thing, and she's really blossomed since then. So they all wrote letters in support of me, and so I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame up there and have to give a big old long speech I'm a little nervous about, but so that's kind of my story. I was invited to speak here today because a guy I work with, his wife works here, and she took a chance and said, hey, would you come speak? And I thought, why not, That was months ago, and I put it off until a couple days ago and said, oh, my God, it's an hour and a half. I better come up with something. So I threw together a really lame PowerPoint presentation. And you have to know, at my age, this is not easy to do. You guys do this like nothing. I'm sure you have classes in it. And when I started out in this business, we didn't even have computers. We used typewriters in college. Yeah, and if we were lucky, we had the kind of typewriters that had the little white tape in it that would actually let you delete stuff. Otherwise, you had to go back and put X's through stuff and then retype it. It was, so I'm not saying technology is, the be-all, end-all, but you guys do have it a little bit easier. So we'll see if this works. As I said, to talk about now and the future, I kind of have to go back and talk about the past. So, hey, look at that. Here's some really boring statistics I found. I won't make you memorize them, but they are kind of telling. And in my business now, when you kind of worry about where newspapers are going because they seem to be going down and folding, and someone who's been in this business for 30 years is kind of like, okay, I'm at the wrong age. If I were 60 right now, I'd be retired and fine. But daily newspapers, since 1990, it's been a 14% decline. That means newspapers have just totally shut down. They don't exist anymore. 14% of them in the last, 21 years or so. Paid circulation, those are your subscribers. That's fallen off 30% in that same time period. Advertising revenue, and this is, if you look, it's just basically the last 10 years. Advertising revenue is what drives a paper, okay? People can say, oh, there's circulation, I'm going to not subscribe to your paper. And we used to joke and say, that's fine, you don't pay the bills anyway. Because when you think about it, a newspaper subscription really doesn't cost all that much. But the advertisers see the circulation numbers, and when they see them going down, they might say, I'm not going to advertise because I'm not reaching as many people. But advertising is what pays all the bills at the paper. And look at that. In the last 10 years, the revenue for advertising has fallen off 53%. That's why your newspapers are dying. Editorial staff, that kind of goes with the hand in hand with the advertising revenue. If you don't have money, you can't pay people. And I would add to that while the staffs have fallen off, the work has probably doubled, because we haven't really changed a whole lot about what we do for the newspapers. You still get pretty much the same coverage you were getting 10 years ago, and we're doing it with half as many people. Well, not quite half, but at our paper, it's about half. New newspaper, the internet. 44% of the population 10 years ago were online. That's in the U.S. Now it's 77%. So that's where the readers have gone. We still haven't found a way to make a lot of money on the internet with advertising. You get the pop-up ads and stuff like that, and a lot of national advertisers are advertising there. But we have a hard time selling to the little mom-and-pop stores because if you're like most readers, you ignore those pop-up ads. I mean, how often do you really click on one and go there? So we still have to find and perfect some kind of model to make money online, or it's going to be even worse. Love that guy. Found this picture online. Back in the day when we watched sports on TV, now back in my day, we didn't have Fox Sports Detroit. We didn't have ESPN. I know, I'm not 80. I'm going to be 50, so. But still, back then, when I grew up watching sports, we didn't have that. If you wanted to watch the Detroit Tigers, you had to wait till the weekend. Channel 3 would show usually the Sunday game and sometimes Saturday too, and that was it. You couldn't watch them every night of the week. NHL was non-existent on television. NBA, I wasn't, didn't really grow up watching the NBA, but I think they still had the Saturday game. And baseball, they did have a national Saturday game of the week. So everybody got to watch that game. But you could not turn on the TV and find a sporting event like you can now. And the ones you could find usually were in black and white. The World Series, those were day games. They wheeled a TV into my third grade class, and we watched the Tigers. And it wasn't the World Series then, it was the ALCS they were in against the Oakland A's. But I remember watching that in my third grade classroom, and it was way cool. Now you have to stay up really late, and if you guys don't have kids, but if anyone had young kids, they can't watch the World Series. So just a little difference. People also read about sports in the newspapers then. It was kind of their only source. Like I said, there was no ESPN. If you stayed up late and you watched your local news, they'd have that little segment, toward the end on sports, so you'd know whether the Tigers won or lost then. But if you didn't, you basically waited for the paper and read about it then. It's quite a different atmosphere today. Today, your smartphone can give you everything you need. You can watch a freaking game on your smartphone now. You know, you don't need your TV, you don't need a newspaper, you don't need this and that. You do need a newspaper, though. I didn't really say that. But just kind of the difference between then and now. Back then, journalists, what they used when they'd go to games or anywhere else, basically a steno pad, so you can take your little notes. The trusty pen. Notice that says reporter pen. I never used that pen. That advertisement looks a little bit older than me, but good old typewriter. Told you about that earlier. You guys ever even used a typewriter? Anybody? You have. Good for you. Why? Good for you. I have an old one like this at home, and man, it takes all your strength to put the keys down. This, the Radio Shack Tandy TRS-80. Reporters call it the Trash 80. This is the early version of the laptop, believe it or not. And you see the little screen up there? You couldn't get any pictures on it. Those were your words. As you're typing along, your words showed up there. And reporters could use this in the field because it came with a set of couplers for a phone. You remember when all the phones had basically the mouthpiece and the earpiece? You would take these couplers and you would hook it up to there. And then you would plug it in the computer and you would dial the number and it would magically send through the phone lines. Now the problem was if anybody jiggled anything and there was a little disruption in the service, your whole story, you'd have to resend it. And it was a real pain to do that. So that's kind of the old version of the laptop. And they got the name Trash 80 for a reason. Nowadays, you have your digital recorders, smartphones, which kind of makes digital recorders useless, but you know, just in case you might want to have both for a backup. Your laptop, iPad, tablet, whatever you want to use, I guess. Back then, delivering the news. The stories were printed in the daily paper. Nowadays, you can get a story anywhere. I think you guys all know this. You probably, does anybody here read the paper? Muskegon a little bit? You read the press or what paper? USA Today. Okay. And I got to ask you guys, why do you look at the newspaper? Okay. Because you think their sports coverage is that good, or for the national sports kind of stuff? But you read it there as opposed to a laptop or a tablet, or both? Both. Okay. People get their news from the websites, obviously. Little plug for our mlive.com, if you can find anything there. Sports Center. I mean, who here watches Sports Center? Yeah. Like I said, they did not have that when I was growing up. In fact, I think I was maybe in college when it first came out, or pretty close to that. And, you know, that's when they were showing tractor pulls and all that, and people are like, who's going to watch a network that's all sports? Because they didn't have NFL and they didn't have the NBA and all that on Sports Center. They started out slowly. They started out with all these goofball sports. And then eventually they got in the game. You know, I was like, wow, people are tuning into this station, and here's an opportunity for them to show sports all the time. So obviously that worked. Nowadays, your news can come from radio simulcast on television. I mean, Dan Patrick and Mike, you hear them on the radio, and if you're somewhere where there's a TV, I mean, they're basically doing their radio show on television. So it's all, sports is everywhere nowadays. Social networking. Do you guys follow any writers or any athletes on Twitter? Yeah? Who do you follow? Okay. And that's, you know, that's what we're telling our reporters, you know, that they have to be on Twitter, they have to be on Facebook, because that's where people are going now, and just a mention of something on there gets that person to click on your link, boom, you've just got another reader. So, and then people see something interesting and they'll be, hey, I might follow that guy. You know, you're kind of building your audience base through your social networking. For those who think sports writing is all glamour, it is not. Back then, sure, you work an 8-hour day maybe, you might work a 5-hour day, whatever, and I mean, it's a whole different ball game now. You might do 1 or 2 stories a day, more likely 1. Your workflow, you go to a game or an event, you watch the game, you take notes during the game, if you're at a high school game or something, you take your own stats. Afterward, you go down, you talk to the coach, try to get the opposing coach, talk to a player, whatever, and then you go back to the office and file your story. Nowadays, a little different story. Your typical day is going to be 10 to 14 hours. You know, who knows how many stories you're going to write a day, because you want to be first with your story. So if you have news, you're going to write up something about that long, you're going to post it online, and then you're going to go get more. You know, you're going to make some more calls, you're going to talk to more people about that story. You might rewrite the same story 4 times in one day, the last version of which will probably go in the newspaper. So you wake up, you check online, see what's happening, hope that, you know, nothing disastrous happened overnight on your beat. You know, you might tweet about something first thing in the morning. Then you're going to go, now, if you're talking about, you know, basketball or the Tigers, for instance, with the Tigers beat, Jim Leland gives a pregame press conference, basically. You go into his office in the clubhouse, and you talk to him before the game even starts. So, you know, you're putting something on Twitter, you're writing a little blurb to put online, you know, putting it on Facebook, whatever. You know, Jim Leland said this, oh my God. Then the game happens. So then you're back up in the press box, you're watching the game, you're taking notes, you're tweeting during the game. You know, you're saying, oh, Miguel Cabrera looks like he's, you know, injured his leg or something during the game. So you're constantly in motion. You're taking notes about how you're going to write your story as well. Game finally ends. You go down and you do your post-game interviews. So Jim Leland's talking again. You're talking to players. You're doing this. You're doing that. And then you have to get up there and post something right away online again. You're going to send something on Twitter. And then you're probably going to write something for the paper, which is probably going to be a little bit longer version than what you've already posted. It might be very similar to something you've posted, but you're getting a lot more in-depth on it. So your day, and Tigers are a great example because the baseball beat, you know, it appears to be glamorous. It's terrible. 162 games, 81 of them are on the road. This postseason with the Tigers, these guys are in Detroit. They don't know if they're going to New York or if they're going to play at home the next day because it depended on what Texas did in their last game, who had the best record. So they find out, you know, at night that the next day they're going to be in New York. So they have to book their flights, they have to get to New York, do their off-day stories, because you want to interview players, you have to have something for the paper every day. Then the rain totally wreaked havoc with that series. You know, you had rainouts, so my guys are canceling flights, booking flights after games because the series was kind of on the brink. Are we going to Texas or are we not? That kind of thing. So it was a real pain. And if you happen to have the luck of having a day game following a night game, for a night game, you're getting at the ballpark at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, the game doesn't start till 7. But, you know, you've got BP you want to watch. You've got Leland's pregame presser. Then you've got the game. And then after the game, you have to do all your writing. So you're getting there about 3 in the afternoon. You're leaving the ballpark probably about 1 o'clock. Okay? And then if there happens to be a day game the next day, which will be a 1 o'clock game, you have to be back at the ballpark at about 10 a.m. So it's really not as glamorous as people think. My baseball writer said all his friends were like, oh my God, you're the luckiest guy in the world. And he said it was all I could do to just tell them, you have no idea, you know, I'd rather die right now. So the job has changed quite a bit. Our future, from something like Citizen Kane, just an old great movie if you've never seen it. If you can watch any old sports writer movies, he wasn't a sports writer, but any old newspaper kind of movies, they're just kind of fun to watch, especially when you compare them to sports writers today. To now, citizen journalism. And you guys have Heard of citizen journalism at all? No? Well, that's basically you. You guys will be writing if you want to. Like this cartoon says, if it wasn't for blogs and podcasts and Twitter, they'd never know what's going on. This is how a lot of people are getting their information now. They're not reading newspapers. They're not even reading stories online. They're looking at what their friends are posting, maybe opening it or just reading the headline and going, oh, really? That's interesting, and moving on. Just fun. Just found some fun stuff on there. Be a citizen journalist. Here's a plea from CNN in, I believe, some foreign country. It doesn't look like here. But see the camera in the eyeball? Basically, you watch it, you see it happen, you report it. Time in 2007 named you the person of the year because this is where our news is going to come from. That's the end of my groovy show. But I want to talk a little bit more about the citizen journalism because if you guys really want to be writers or even just dabble in it, you can. Right now on mlive.com, if you click on the little high school sports section on there, you'll see something over on the left-hand side of that page that you get to, and it'll say, want to be a reporter? Click here. You can click there, and you can register. And if you want to cover Montague High School football games for MLive, all you have to do is sign up. They'll show you how to do it on that page, and basically you're doing a lot of what my night clerks do, which is inputting those stats, writing up a little blurb on it, and hitting the button, and there it is. It's up on MLive. Now, it's not coming into the newspaper yet, but we will get there. We will start using all that stuff. So if you guys are serious about wanting to write, you can do that kind of thing. We're expanding that into news stuff. Just pay attention. I think you'll find in the not too distant future, mlive.com will start recruiting people to do all kinds of blogs. In fact, I think we already have. It's hard for me to keep track because I have my hand in the newspaper and I have it on there. But they'll be recruiting people like you if you really want to write about stuff. So pay attention to that. So that is more and more where we're going. I wanted to point out something to you guys because part of this talk was about how we try to satisfy online readers and the print readers. And it's pretty much impossible. As I said, we've got about half the staff we used to, and we have to do twice the work, especially with online readers. You constantly have to feed online. And we found that people are online most of the time during work hours, or school hours, 9 to 5 during the week. They're messing around, they're seeing what's up there, that kind of thing. So we're constantly trying to post stuff during that time, okay? As you know, sports don't happen until night. So they also have to cover the games at night and work at night. We also have our copy desk that comes in at night and puts out the next day's paper. Now, we're a PM paper. It doesn't arrive on your doorstep till 5 o'clock at night or so. But it actually gets printed about 7 o'clock in the morning. So if you're around town and you see our paper in the news boxes, it's there by 9:30 or so in the morning. So it's almost as if it were an AM paper. We also have on weekends our Sunday edition. We have several editions of our Sunday paper. The first one is called the One Star, and that one, our deadline is 8:30 at night on Saturday night. So if you pay attention, last Saturday's Michigan State-Wisconsin game started at what time? Anybody? Yep, 8 o'clock. So that game is barely kicked off, and our paper has to be out. So when I get the calls usually on Monday morning, did you even know that Michigan State played on Saturday night? How could you be so stupid? And it's like, how many times do I have to explain? We have several editions. We have a 3-star and a 4-star, which are later editions of the paper. Now, we hold those to get things like that in the paper. So I'm going to show you the difference. I'm kind of glad it's a small group here. This is our 1-star, okay? We have a feature here on a Michigan State basketball player. We have the advance for the Lions-Falcons game on Sunday. And we have a column from our auto racing writer about IndyCar needing different measures for safety after the death a couple weeks ago of Dan Weldon. Okay, so that's the 1-star edition. If you look at our 3-star, pretty much a whole different page. You got the Michigan State game in here. We had the World Series here. And we kept the Lions advanced because the Lions are huge. I mean, everybody watches the Lions or pays attention to the Lions. So what that means is we had to do the paper basically twice, do the sports section twice. And this happens almost all the time on Saturdays. You know, if you look through this, you're basically tearing it up and doing it all over again. So when you see mistakes, please keep that in mind. But we do catch a lot of flack for not having it in there. And one thing we try to combat that with is we let readers know in a little MLive exclusive box up here that, hey, you know, the game ended too late for this edition. Go to MLive and you'll see all the coverage. And I think that's helped quite a bit. I think that people aren't as angry as they used to be, and they're maybe a little bit more understanding of that. So I was going to give you guys a little quiz, but I don't know if I should or not. It's just a fun little sports quiz. I don't know. Maybe not. So since it's such a small group, I'm not going to keep you here all day either, but I want to open it up to any questions you guys have. And you have to ask questions. That's a rule. Each of you has to ask at least one. Yeah?
Is MLive part of the Grand Rapids Press, or is that just like an online, like Google type thing?
That's a great question. Is MLive part of the Grand Rapids Press, or is it a Google kind of thing? There's a chain of how things work. We're basically one giant corporation, okay? You have Newhouse. Newhouse owns several newspapers across the country. They own the Portland Oregonian. They own the newspaper in New Orleans. They own the 8 newspapers, or now there's 7 because Ann Arbor doesn't have a newspaper anymore. The 7 newspapers in Michigan, which is Muskegon, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, and Jackson, okay? So they own a whole gob of newspapers down here, right? They also own Advance Internet. Whoops, I'm not even going to write that. Advance Internet. Advance Internet owns MLive. So we're all under the Newhouse umbrella. So we're in the same company, don't necessarily own each other, but the Grand Rapids Press does not have its own website. It falls under MLive. So MLive is all of those Michigan papers I mentioned, and they have some freelance writers in the Detroit area. We just hired some freelance writers in Lansing to cover some of those, mainly to cover the Capitol and stuff like that. So it's all under the Newhouse umbrella, and then it just kind of filters down. But an easy way to find the Grand Rapids Press if you're going to MLive, go to mlive.com/grand-rapids, okay? If you haven't already set us as your home page on MLive, it's very difficult to navigate, but but if you're patient, you can find your way through it. Next. Yeah. I would say because of the grind, baseball. Mainly because the season, you know, it starts in February when players report to spring training. And it starts before that because you're signing your free agents, you're doing all that. So basically, it starts in earnest in February when pitchers and catchers report, which is mid-February. So you're covering all their practices leading up to spring training. Then you're covering spring training until you finally come back north in April. And then that season goes until right now. And then there's a 5-day grace period after the final World Series game where there's no activity. After that, you can sign free agents. So, and you know, there's a flurry of it then. Everybody wants to get their free agents lined up, this and that. There is no off season anymore, and it used to be there would be an off season because you couldn't report on any of this because you didn't have Twitter and you didn't have, you know, cell phones and you didn't have laptops, and so if it happened, you didn't even know about it. It was kind of cool. Now you have to report on it all. I think, too, that the NHL and the NBA are really tough grinds. And that's mainly because, at least in baseball, when you go to a city, you're there for 3 games. NBA and NHL, you're there for 1 game, then you turn around and their schedules are so screwed up. You know, they'll have you in out in California one night and down in Florida the next. I mean, that's a grind on your physical person. I don't think the coverage is that hard, but just the travel with the teams and stuff. NFL, I think, is the easiest because it's 1 day a week. But you have the most interest in the NFL. It's by far and away number one on any page views or anything like that. So. Yeah.
You mentioned the invite or be a reporter thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any requirements for that?
Basically, they have to be able to trust you. They have to be able to know that you're not going to go in there and type in some obscenities or do something as a joke, and they will. They'll cut you off then if you do that. And I think there is some little screening process to probably stay away from that. But you don't have to pay money. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be willing to work, and to cover your school. And they're pretty lax in it too. Like they're not going to say, okay, if you're going to cover basketball for us, you're going to be at every game and do this and that. Don't quote me on that, but I think that they'll work with you, and you can just report on what you want to report on. So I suggest, if you're really interested in doing this, it's a good way to start. At least get your name out there, I don't believe they do, and that's the key with this citizen journalism thing. They want people out there to report stuff. They're not so willing to pay for it, and that's where I told you about the advertising revenue and then the editorial staffs. I mean, I went to school to do this. I'm trained to do this. So, and it's been my profession for this long. But even people like me, they're going, well, if we can get someone to do it for free, why would we pay somebody? And it's true. And if you don't want to do it for free, guess what? Somebody else will. So, yeah.
Do you get to choose what sport you want to report on?
For MLive? For that thing?
No, for the cross franchise.
Well, I'm an editor, so I don't report on anything. Although I do write a pets blog, because that's my real passion is pets. I've been doing sports for far too long. It's like, really? Another football season? But coming into the door at a newspaper or anywhere, it's not likely. They're probably going to make you do a lot of the grunt work, which you should. You should learn how to cover just about anything. And then you prove, everybody has to prove themselves. So you prove yourself there, and if you're really good, eventually say, hey, I really want to cover basketball, or I really want to cover hockey. If you're good, you'll get there. I guarantee that. I've had some people who, they start out on these little beats and stuff, but I keep an eye on them. And, when it comes the time and they say, I really am interested in doing this and I have an opening, guess who I go to first? The person that busted their ass for me, and is willing to do just about anything, because that's what it takes in this business. And that said, there also are jobs, not just reporting and not just sports writing. You also can do copy editing and page design, which are the people that select the photos, write the headlines, edit the stories for print or online. And there are jobs online doing that now too. You're taking their work and you're posting it on the website. Everybody needs an editor, You start throwing stuff up there and sometimes there are going to be problems. You need another set of eyes to look at it. So there are a lot of websites that have openings for things like that. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to do during the day, like throughout the week?
Favorite thing to do for my job throughout the week? Day to day. I love to edit copy. I love to read other people's stories and make them better. And that's why I'm an editor. I recognized early on in my career, I think, that I was a better editor. I could take somebody else's work and make it better than I was a writer. I know that there are better writers out there than me, but I can look at their stuff, recognize what's good, change it a little bit, and make it that much better. our Lions writer, I wish I'd have brought today's paper, but our Lions writer filed a story last night, and I tweaked his lead by about 3 words and made it, I think, a lot better, and he agreed. So it's things like that. We're just changing a few words here and there and having a fresh set of eyes look at something. That's what I love to do is make people look better. It sure isn't going to meetings, and I do a lot of that. Surfing the internet, like that. No, but I'd say that, editing copy. I don't do as much as I'd like to anymore. So, yeah.
How often do you see a biased article?
Quite honestly, I think that just about any story is going to be biased. The Falcons didn't win that game last Sunday. The Lions lost it, right? In the Atlanta market, the Falcons won. Here, the Lions lost. So in that sense, it's always going to be slanted. Now, you also have columns and analysis, which are going to be very opinionated, and they should be, because that's, but I think more and more those two are melding together, and you don't see the straight news story as often in sports. It's more analysis, tell people why something happened or how it happened, rather than just the fact that it happened. Because in our paper especially, and with the internet, everybody already knows the score. Everybody has seen the highlights on SportsCenter, right? You've watched the Lions highlights 5 times by the time you get our paper. So you don't want us to tell you that, Matthew Stafford threw for 242 yards. You already know that. But you want us to tell you how his ankle's doing, what it means to the team. Oh my God, is this happening again? Are the Lions on a collapse? You want to know that. So I think in sports writing, there's a little bit of that everywhere. And like I said, the best example is not that Wisconsin lost, but Michigan State won that game. So, anyone else? Oh, come on, you guys. Okay. Don't you want to know, what my favorite sport is, or my favorite athlete, or anything like that? Yeah. I don't have one, no. My favorite all-time athlete is probably Cal Ripken Jr. You guys all know who he is, right? Yeah, okay. The way that guy approached his job every day, the guy worked his butt off. And he showed up for work every day, obviously. Kind of a joke about that, I used to stalk him, kind of. Oh, God, I forgot you're filming this. But when I lived in South Florida, the Orioles had their spring training down there. And I go to a game, and I would go to watch Cal play a couple times, And I had this picture that someone at the Muskegon Chronicle, a photographer, had taken many, many years prior to that and had given to me because they knew I was this fan, So I bring it to this game because this guy tells me, hey, I know somebody who can get it into Cal to sign, right? So I go to this game, and it's a cold, believe it or not, South Florida is a cold, crappy, rainy day. I'm sitting through this exhibition baseball game. Cal was taken out in the 3rd inning or something, but I have to wait because he's not going to do it during the game, right? So I'm sitting there. My friends are cold. They leave me. I have to wait because by this time I've given the photo to the guy. I at least want my picture back if the guy's not going to sign it, So I have to wait till afterwards, and I wait. And Harold Baines, he was a former player, played for the White Sox, and he also played for the Orioles. He comes out, and he's standing in the clubhouse, and he's just looking at me like, what are you doing? I go, I'm waiting for Cal. I'm waiting for a picture. And he's like, let me see what I can do. So he goes in, and pretty soon comes out, and I get the signature. It's like, to Mary, my very best, Cal Ripken Jr. So I was just thrilled to death. Then when I lived in Chicago, a friend of mine and I, Marilyn Garcia, the USA Today writer that I was telling you about, she and I were going to the White Sox-Orioles game that night because I wanted to see Cal. And it was right when his book had first come out. And it was April, early in the season. It was snowing at Comiskey Park. we go there, and because it's snowing, there's hardly any fans there, so we get a seat right by the Orioles dugout, right? It's like, come on, let's do it. Got there late. I'm telling Marilyn, we got to go. He's never going to sign this. I wanted him to sign the book. I said, he's never going to sign this if the game's already started. He'll only sign during batting practice because he's focused. So we go there. Batting practice is over. I'm screwed. But we're sitting down there, and it's still before the game. And I walked down on the railing next to the dugout, and I had the book in my hand, and I leaned over, and I saw him down there, and I held the book out, and I go, Cal, just one? And he starts walking toward me, he's at the other end of the dugout. He kind of starts walking, and he's saying something. I thought he was just talking to his fellow players, and he keeps walking. He comes all the way up to me. And here I am, I'm working for the Chicago Tribune. I'm a sports person and all this, but I still get, I'm still a fan. And he said, where'd you get that? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, is that out? He didn't even know his book had come out yet. I said, yeah, it's up at, I think it was Borders, up on Michigan Avenue. And he goes, really? He goes, I didn't even know it was out. And he opens it, and he goes, I don't know what to do. Where am I supposed to sign this? And I go, you can sign anywhere you want, sir, And so he signs it. So that tells me I got the very first signature on that book. And it was just like, oh, my God, I thought I was going to die, So, yeah, I still get giddy over things like that. I've met a lot of great athletes, mainly through other things, not even necessarily through work. Calvin Johnson with the Lions, they do a pet calendar every year. And I went over to Detroit to do a little story on that. And so I got to sit and chat with Calvin Johnson for a while and a couple other Lions players. And that was kind of cool. But, that's the fun part of my job, is getting to meet people like that. So. Anything else? Okay. Appreciate you being a good audience and asking at least the required one question. And I wish you guys luck. Again, if you're interested in doing something for mlive.com, go on there and get a start.